Is Discord trying to screw you out of a class action? Is BetterHelp offering fake therapy? Let's find out. Hey Legal Eagles, it's time to litigate the terms of service for Discord and BetterHelp. If you have a suggestion for the next legal topic, please leave it below, and if you disagree with me, please be sure to leave your comment in the form of an objection. But remember to keep things civil, because Stella, the legal beagle, carries the gavel of justice, and she's not afraid to use it in the comments section. All right, let's think like a lawyer. Today we're talking TOSs, terms of service. These are usually really dry, boring contracts, but there are two particular TOSs in the news recently, those from Discord and BetterHelp, and not in a good way. There are two issues that I want to discuss today. Number one, is Discord's arbitration clause and class action waiver legal? And number two, does BetterHelp's terms mean that they are offering sham services? What is a TOS, or term of service? A term of service is that long contract that you sign when you sign up for a website or some software that governs your relationship. And I'm sure everyone here has read the entire contract before clicking accept and then going on to use a website, right? Right? No one reads all of the terms of service, but despite the fact that you may not read it, the term of service still governs the relationship between you and that website or the software that you're using. The term of service will do a couple of things. Number one, they set out the rules by which you must abide if you are going to continue to use their software or service. And number two, they also provide the obligations that the company is going to give to you in return for you being a user of that website or software. But a term of service doesn't have to have any particular terms. It can lay out rules, it can create obligations on behalf of the website, it can create obligations on behalf of the user to the website, or it can be simply a disclaimer that disclaims any kind of warranty or any kind of relationship at all between the website itself and the users of that website to try and get rid of liability as between the users and the website itself. Today we're going to talk about two TOSs in particular, those from a company called Discord, which provides VoIP or VoIP services, and the second from a company called BetterHelp, which provides online teletherapy services to its users. The first TOS I want to discuss comes from Discord. What's controversial here is that a few days ago, Discord created a new term in their TOS that is a class action waiver. Ostensibly, it prevents any user of the Discord services from filing a class action lawsuit and instead requires those users to go into what's called binding arbitration instead of using the courts. So let's take a step back first and talk about what is a class action. A class action is a way of aggregating harms that are so small that no one would ever file suit as a result of that particular harm. There was a movement that started in the States and then was governed mostly by federal law, which allows a bunch of really small claimants to aggregate their claims together. Now, there are a ton of requirements. Rule 23 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure requires that you have to have things like an adequate class that must be ascertainable. There must be enough of those claims to make it basically worthwhile to file a class action suit. Those claimants must have a common claim, and that the class representatives must have a claim that's typical of those common claims of the class. And there are other requirements like the representative counsel must be adequate and a number of other things. But the bottom line is that a class action lawsuit is a way for one or a handful of class members to basically put forward a case on behalf of the entire class of people. So instead of just filing suit on behalf of yourself, as you would in a normal lawsuit, you're filing suit with the help of your attorneys on behalf of hundreds, potentially thousands, and sometimes even millions of people. And by aggregating all of those small things together, you create a financial incentive to go forward with that case. A class action lawsuit historically has been done by the Attorney General, but now, for the most part, it's done by private individuals. So you might ask yourself, why would someone file a class action lawsuit? Well, it's partially the people themselves and it's partially the attorneys. The attorneys are going to get a large cut of the payout, often you are aggregating so many of these small claims together that a class action lawsuit is often a bet the company case. So that if the company lost it and had to pay out what the plaintiff is claiming, it might bankrupt the entire company. I've handled a ton of class actions before, usually defending very innocent companies from scurrilous plaintiff's attorneys just trying to make a buck. But, I've also been a member of a class before, and I've gotten one of those $2 checks from being a class member in a very small class action recovery. So I see it both ways. I understand the need for companies to have a punitive action taken against them when they've clearly done something wrong. But I've also seen plaintiffs' attorneys out there just in it to get the attorney's fees from that big pool of money. So Discord changed its term of service and now requires a class action waiver and a private arbitration clause, which means that instead of being able to use the regular court system and using a class action in the regular court system, they force you into private arbitration where you're not able to file a class action lawsuit. Now, arbitration sounds scary, but arbitration is really just an informal version of court. The main difference is that generally both parties have to hire the arbitrator. So instead of regular court where you're not paying for the salary of the judge, in arbitration, both sides usually have to pay for the arbitrator's salary. So it's more informal. You can set whatever rules you want as long as they're agreed upon by both sides, and you have to pay for the arbitrator's time. Now, Discord came out with a statement defending their decision to include these arbitration agreements, saying that class actions can be very bad. They're used by attorneys to get huge fees, and they take those fees out of the class recovery, and that people often get really small rewards they don't care about, and they often just throw away those checks. Now, all of those things are in fact true, but you could see them as features, not bugs. Again, often, if people weren't able to aggregate all of these claims, they never would have been incentivized to file the suit in the first place. And believe me, lawyers don't like to work for free, so unless there is a big enough incentive, they won't handle those cases. I've handled both court cases and arbitrations, and I can't say for a fact that one is necessarily better than the other. Arbitration is almost certainly faster because courts are really backed up. Arbitration gives you individualized attention, whereas in court, the judge is spreading his or her time between hundreds or thousands of different cases at any given time. Whereas in arbitration, you might get 1 to 3 retired judges who probably aren't handling that many cases. Arbitration is generally way more expensive because both parties have to pay the arbitrators hourly. And I think the last arbitrator I had to hire was $900 an hour. They can charge these fees because they have a certain pedigree from being ex-judges and really knowing what they're talking about. And good arbitrators are really important to hire. But I can't say that an arbitration necessarily favors the defendant, which is something that I see people saying all the time. I think people usually say that because of the cost. But again, arbitrators themselves are just as good as regular judges. So I don't think that they're going to be biased in favor of the defendant, necessarily. Here, in particular, though, the fees issue isn't as bad as it normally would be. In Discord's TOS, they say specifically that they will pay for any fees over what it would cost to file in court, unless the arbitrator finds that the case itself was filed frivolously. So one of the main complaints that you might have about arbitration in the consumer context, where what consumer is going to want to fight a $100 case if they're going to have to pay out hundreds of dollars in fees to the arbitrator? Well, here, Discord is already agreeing to pay for the fees of the arbitrator. All you have to pay for are the normal filing fees that it would cost to file suit. Now, those themselves can be in the hundreds of dollars, but still, that's nothing compared to paying an arbitrator $900 an hour for dozens, if not hundreds of hours. Now, interestingly, this actually might give you more leverage against Discord because since Discord is on the hook to pay for these arbitrator services, Discord might rather just settle the case for a nominal fee instead of having to go through expensive arbitration where they're paying for not only their own attorneys, but also the fees of the arbitrator as well. So ironically, this term of service may actually give some leverage to the consumer. But on the other hand, the TOS does clearly require you to waive your class action rights, so you can't file a class action lawsuit. Now, the big benefit, as we discussed, is being able to aggregate all these small claims that no one would individually want to file suit over. And instead, it requires you to file an individual suit on your own basis. So you lose the benefit of having this litigation, if there is litigation, taken care of for you by some other attorney and some other representative plaintiff. And frankly, it's a relatively small chance that it's going to be relevant to you, and an even smaller chance that it's a recovery that you care about. But it certainly does prevent anyone from taking punitive action against Discord for a violation of the law. And some people think that lawsuits, and especially class action lawsuits, are created specifically for their punitive action to make sure that companies stay in line, even when the recoveries are very, very small on an individual basis. So at the end of the day, this is a mixed bag for users of Discord. It's not as scary as it first seems, but there's actually some good things in there. It allows you to go through arbitration, which can be much faster than courts and much more informal, on Discord's dime. However, you do give up the right to file a class action lawsuit, and you may lose out on some small checks that would have been done by class action attorneys and class action plaintiffs in some other universe. So there are some good things and some bad things in this new Discord TOS. But the question is it legal? Well, recent Supreme Court does in fact allow these class action waivers, starting in 2011 in the AT&T versus Concepcion case, and recently reaffirmed this year in Epic versus Lewis and Ernst & Young versus Morris. Class action waivers are enforceable, and companies can force you into private arbitration. So you might not like it, but it's probably legal. So let's move on to the second term of service, that from the company called BetterHelp. My understanding is that BetterHelp is an online platform that links online therapists with consumers. I've never used BetterHelp. Unlike a lot of people on YouTube, I am not sponsored by BetterHelp, but I can certainly see the benefit of being able to just dial up a therapist using Skype instead of having to drive, over to a therapist and see them in person. Maybe that's a good service, I don't know. But what I can tell you is that there's a huge controversy brewing over BetterHelp's term of service. As of a few weeks ago, the BetterHelp TOS implied that they didn't check the credentials or the background of all the therapeutic professionals that they use to link up between consumers and the therapists. So let's look at this disclaimer in the original terms of service. It seems pretty clear that the old TOS says that BetterHelp was not obligated to check out the background or the credentials of the therapists that they use. Now, even as originally written, this is a floor. This is a disclaimer of liability. It's a statement that there is no obligation, but it's not a statement that BetterHelp was absolutely not checking on their professionals. According to BetterHelp themselves, they were checking on the backgrounds and credentials of their therapists, but they didn't want to be on the hook for misstatements by those therapists, and they didn't want to be obligated to undertake that, even though that they were generally providing that service. Phil DeFranco did an entire video about this. I'll link to that down below. And from what I can piece together, he seems to get things more or less right.
From that terms of service, there's this question that pops up of, okay, are you just allowing anyone to say that they're a counselor, right? Because that language is concerning and is completely alien to my understanding of how they go and vet these people. So from here, I then reached out to our contact at BetterHelp. We ended up being connected with the founder of BetterHelp, Elan Matas, and he gave me a statement where at one point he talked about the terms and conditions in question, saying, the terms and conditions document typically provides the legalese that defines the extent of liability and mitigates legal risks associated with such platforms. We will be revising the terms and conditions document so it more closely matches the vetting process we currently conduct.
This is kind of standard legalese that you'll see in a TOS like this. It's about preventing legal liability. It is not a statement that BetterHelp was actively turning a blind eye to their therapists. And my understanding is that in reaction to this controversy, BetterHelp has revised their term of service to more accurately reflect what they actually do, and now they are taking on the affirmative legal burden associated with those actions. But even as originally written, it doesn't seem like this was much to do about anything. Additionally, PewDiePie, who seems to have an axe to grind in this particular controversy, was aggrieved by BetterHelp's disclaimer of warranty, pointing out that BetterHelp stated that they don't stand by their professionals. Now, this is called a disclaimer. This is very, very common. In fact, I would bet that in the TOS of almost every website that you interact with, there is a disclaimer that says that they disclaim any warranty for the services that they provide. And really, it's not surprising that BetterHelp would be any different. BetterHelp is basically just a platform that links up online therapists to patients. So it's not surprising that the platform would want to disclaim liability from the independent contractors that it contracts with. This is pretty standard for any kind of platform in almost any website that you do business with. For example, my guess is that if you hire a plumber through Angie's List is not going to guarantee the work of that plumber. This kind of disclaimer is very, very common, and it's certainly nothing to freak out about. Similar terms are probably behind every website that you visit and govern every relationship with any platform that you use. So I can't say whether you should go to BetterHelp for therapy services, but I can say you should not go to PewDiePie for legal advice. Do you agree? Leave your objections in the comments, and until next time, I'll see you in court.